At this point, it wouldn't really be out of pocket to ask if James Rodriguez even enjoys club football anymore. For someone who was so consistently a star for Colombia, just look to his multiple man-of-the-match performances at the most recent Copa America, he just cannot seem to get it right at the club level. The gulf between his most recent club and country performances is as wide as the Pacific. Someone who was so sought after in 2014 was taking the dreaded end-of-career tour from a Premier League outfit to Qatari football, to Greece, then Brazil, all by the age of 32. But that aforementioned Copa America form saw him thrust back into a top league in Europe, but less than 6 months later, and his contract has already been terminated. James Rodriguez is such a great talent, but has become one of the biggest enigmas during his career.
I've been a fan since the days of Zidane, Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos.
We've heard talk of this over and over and over. James Rodriguez was a young star at FC Porto, continued to build his reputation at AS Monaco, and absolutely exploded during the 2014 World Cup, where he made history in propelling Colombia to their best ever finish in a World Cup, the quarterfinals. Something that often doesn't get mentioned here is that they did this without Radamel Falcao, the team's all-time top scorer. Who stepped up with the goals? James Rodriguez, who was just 22 during the tournament, scoring 6 to become the tournament's top scorer to go with his 2 assists, equaling the goal contributions of Thomas Müller, actually. He was snubbed for the Golden Ball in that tournament, which was given to Lionel Messi, as James Rodriguez didn't even finish in the top 3. But he did enough to become the most sought-after player of the summer, and his move to Real Madrid was finalized shortly after the tournament on July 22nd, 2014. This came after James gushed about Real Madrid during the 2014 World Cup. You know, what everyone says about them before they move to them. It would be a dream to play for Real, that kind of stuff. His first season was quite the success, personally, as James was utilized all over the place and reached double digits in both goals and assists. But Real Madrid went trophyless in that campaign. But no matter, he would win a couple of league titles and a couple of Champions League titles, but he would be looking toward the exit door not long after. You see, this was where he began seeing the emergence of Kroos, Casemiro, and Modric in the midfield, with Isco sprinkled in there now and then. But mentioning Isco, he and James had a similar fate due to their similarities at Real Madrid. Both thrive as a number 10 or playing as a wide playmaker, but have suffered from pure classic 10s not being utilized by football coaches in general. James would thrive playing as the 10 in a 4-2-3-1, for example. He would thrive as being central to a manager's attacking tactics, but as the game evolved, James failed to do so. Plus, it didn't help that Rafa Benitez didn't seem to take to him at all. More on him later, though. James went on a 2-year loan with Bayern Munich, but he never really adapted to the weather despite having some very good matches. James himself said on separate occasions that he had 2 fantastic years at Bayern and has nothing but love for them, even if, quote, "It's cold there. The Germans are also cold people, even if I was treated fantastically at FC Bayern. The cold is hard, but I am often at home, so I feel it more when I'm playing or training." So 2 mentions of the cold there. Bayern ultimately passed on signing him despite being interested in making him permanent, as James wanted to go to Atletico Madrid, the first of 2 occasions where James was allegedly somewhat close to joining Atleti, the second of which being when he was with Everton. When James was playing in the tropical paradise, that is Merseyside.
No, I'm really happy. I'm happy to be with this great club, this club with so much history.
This was weird. From Real Madrid to Bayern, back to Real for a season where he would start just 5 matches under Zidane, and then to Everton? It helped that Carlo Ancelotti was the coach of Everton at the well... What a weird time, eh? Carlo Ancelotti and James Rodriguez at Everton. Anyway, Ancelotti, who helped James to his best ever season at Real Madrid, no doubt swayed James to join him in that aforementioned tropical paradise, where the cold wouldn't be an issue, right? Uh-oh. To be fair to him, James never really cited the weather as a reason to want to leave. We did see James suffer from injuries in that season, something that has haunted him throughout his career. Calf injuries. In that one season with Everton, the 2020-21 season, he had 4 separate calf injuries, or incidences of injury, that ruled him out of 14 matches. He previously had calf injuries at Bayern and Real, as well as hamstring issues, knee ligament issues. The physical side of football was never really his strong suit. He was punished by injuries. But when he was available at Everton, he showed that he could be an absolute magician with the ball still, easily their best player when he was on the pitch. He played a big role in Everton's 2-0 win away to Liverpool in that season, but after that, he was dealing with those broken calves again. But what brought the end of his Everton career after just a single season, despite signing for 2, the man who didn't rate him at Real Madrid, Rafa Benitez, was signed on at Everton. One of the things that has hampered James is closely tied to his inability to adapt to another way of playing. He doesn't have the speed to be a winger really in the modern game, nor does he have the work rate to be a midfielder that presses and tracks back to help in defense, something that has held him back a lot when coupled with his injuries and need to be central to his team rather than him adapting to his team and managers. On the wing, he can play as a wide playmaker, but not a classic winger. With Rafa Benitez coming in and with James joining Everton late, carrying yet another injury,
James Rodriguez has left Everton and he's signed for the Qatari club Al Rayyan for an undisclosed fee.
This is where we lost James completely, really. Well, he wasn't playing at his 2014 to 2016 peak in his final Real Madrid seasons or even at Bayern and Everton. He was still around. He was still present. You knew where he was and you heard his name regularly. With James being in Qatar, we didn't see much of him, and again, injuries didn't help his case either. But of course, when he did play, he excelled because it's not exactly the highest caliber league, right? Just look at his reaction to first watching his team Al Rayyan play from the stands, shortly after signing with them. He wasn't long for Qatar, and so began an absolute blitz of the globe. Jorge Mendes managed to drop him off at one of the clubs Mendes uses to dump talent, Olympiacos. I mean, seriously, you should see how many Mendes clients end up there. But after just 23 matches with Olympiacos, his contract was terminated once again, with a statement from the club reading, Olympiacos FC and James Rodriguez have decided to terminate their cooperation. James will always be part of our club and a member of the red and white family. We want to thank him for his service and we wish him every success in the future. The details of why he left are a bit murky. There were about 6 matches remaining in the season at the time of James' departure. My guess, it was a poor season by Olympiacos' standards, and with both sides knowing that he would be leaving at the end of his short contract, which again saw him injury-riddled, they figured they may as well cut their ties because he was injured and wouldn't feature in the final matches anyway. And so, what was next for James this time?
Coisas increíbles acontecem aqui no São Paulo.
Back to South America, but playing for São Paulo. Massive amounts of excitement surrounding this given the massive talent that James is, or was, that he has, I guess we should say. Some were thinking that with James back in a South American environment, he would find his footing again and become a top player. Nope. Unfortunately, even as São Paulo, despite tons of excitement from fans of many Brazilian clubs even, despite thinking that this was a massive coup for Brazilian football in 2023, it just never worked out. He scored an absolute banger while he was with the club, but he was rarely starting matches. He was barely making it into the matchday squads, and he made just 12 appearances, garnering 638 minutes. That's a bad average. All the while, he was still playing for Colombia, even captaining them, despite struggling in Brazil. And this is where things got interesting. Just think of everything we've spoken of so far, from the peak at Real Madrid, to Bayern, to Everton, to Al Rayyan, to Olympiacos, never really settled, never reaching those heights that he was at during the 2014 World Cup. And a full decade later, James Rodriguez was one of the stars of the 2024 Copa America. In fact, with his goal and 6 assists, James Rodriguez was the star of Copa America, winning the Player of the Tournament award after helping Colombia to the final, which they lost 1-0 in extra time to Argentina. So, what are we all thinking at this point? Had James finally found himself again? After taking a tour of the globe, was he finally back to being the James that most of us remember him as, or at the very least, the romanticized version of him in our memories? Was this the start of an incredibly unlikely comeback in his career? Would he finally get that Atletico Madrid move after being linked to them while he was with Bayern and Everton? Well, he would end up getting a move to Madrid via Rayo Vallecano, but hey, this was James back in a top 5 league, right? A 1-year deal was signed with the option of another year if all went well. Except he was never back in the league, was he? At least not as often as he would have liked, because once again, his inability to press the opposition and contribute defensively has been his downfall. Even with Iraola leaving a couple of seasons ago, his assistant Inigo Perez took over and continued their high pressing style of play. James never ever looked like he could keep up in that regard, even in his start against a third division side in the Copa del Rey recently in December. He was a liability whenever Rayo Vallecano didn't have possession of the ball. His ability on the ball, fantastic. His ability from set pieces, incredible. But everything else still leaves a lot to be desired in modern football, modern tactics, and that leads to where we are now. Just 7 appearances for Rayo Vallecano, no La Liga football since a cameo appearance against Las Palmas on November 8th, just 205 minutes played in total since joining Rayo Vallecano, and a contract termination. Yet another in his career, as he will seek football elsewhere. It really does beg the question of where he could end up, where he could be successful now. As stated, he absolutely needs to be relinquished of all defensive duties in order for him to be successful. He's become the definition of a luxury player, right? And I don't mean that as a slur or disparagingly. There isn't a baked-in negative to luxury players. They are simply that, a luxury to have if you can afford them, both monetarily and tactically. There are calls for MLS sides to consider him as someone to build around. With James, I'm genuinely at a loss for words at this point, which is too bad, because he is so clearly talented. He's someone who is a joy to watch when they are on song, but we just don't see it enough. Wherever he ends up next, though, hopefully he'll be able to thrive. Either that or just retire from club football and worry about Colombia. He doesn't seem to need playing time, you know? He was barely getting it at São Paulo, and then he still got the player of the tournament at the Copa America. That's insane. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon. Bye.